If you need technical assistance, you can email help@ci.reading.ma.us, or you may call 781-942-6663. Please, as a reminder, once we get started, the chat function is to be used only for points of order and other procedural motions. Sometimes when we make those procedural motions, they have to come at the right time. So we try to be judicious and jump in when we can. Voting will take place through the polling function. You must use Android, Apple, iOS apps or on a mobile device with the Zoom app on your mobile device or computer. All right, we have a test question in the chat. Do you like Jane's mask? Of course. So you want to ask that question, Alan, to the body? You're gonna ask everybody to test their raise hand feature right now. Actually, it's a good time to do that.
There's a test. Now, hold on. There's a test poll that just came up.
Oh, I just see the poll. Yep. Okay.
It looks like I'm too late to ask. They've already caught on.
Please answer yes or no. There we go. Amy is fast.
Yes.
Amy Lannon is our poll master this evening. Library Director Amy Lannon.
I will leave that up for 45 seconds per the town moderators protocols.
There you go.
Well, it's looking pretty good. Voting
Yeah, it really is.
101 in the affirmative, 12 in the negative. Looks like your mask passes muster.
All right. Well, that's acceptable. I'll be sure to let the person who gave it to me know that Reading Town Meeting is weighed in on the mask. Outstanding.
So did anybody not see the poll?
Actually, you know what? I'm going to lower all hands. Okay, now, if anybody did not see the poll, please raise your hand. All right, we're not seeing any hands. Just, oh, here we go. We got one. Gregory Stepler. Mr. Stepler, I'm going to, oh, hands down again. Okay. Mr. Paglusha said, may the Schwartz be with you. Thank you. And also with you. And if you're Episcopalian, you have to say, and let us pray after that, but that's different. Okay, we're at 130 attendees this evening. And we have a couple more minutes just to let folks know you still have a couple of minutes. So we're looking good. How's the pack? Can we get a sound check from the pack?
This is the pack. Do I come through?
Yeah, it's perfect. That's
Good.
fantastic. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to spotlight you. So if you are an attendee, you should be able to see the pack right now. Mr. Crook is there. He's doing an admirable job. How many attendees do we have at the pack?
2.
Okay, great. Good to know. We have a question in the chat from Teresa Wiggins. She has a Zoom question. Teresa, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'm going to let you speak. Go ahead, Ms. Wiggins.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to double check. I'm noticing on the page that we must use the Zoom app. I don't actually have the Zoom app, but I'm assuming that my poll choices are going through.
Are you on a computer?
Yes.
Did you see the poll?
Yes.
Then you're fine.
Okay, good. Just
right.
wanted to double check. Thank you.
Nope, that's the question. It's good to ask questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much. You're all set. I'm going to disable your speaking and we will continue on to the meeting. All right. Great question. We are about 1 minute away. This feels like, I'm feeling like a little bit like NASA. For the folks at home, I have multiple screens in front of me. We all have multiple screens, plus a giant screen on the wall that we can see what you're seeing. So this is good. Ms. Lusk, you can do this from your iPhone, but you need to make sure that you download the Zoom app from the App Store. It's a free app. So that you can vote in the polling function. It should just take a couple of minutes if you don't already have it. But I know you were on the other night, and so if you're able to vote there, you should be fine. You're welcome.
Thomas O'Rourke has his hand up.
I see it. Okay. Mr. O'Rourke, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I missed the poll. I just signed on. I assume you can see me and everything is okay.
You've got a little bit of interesting sound going on. Can you talk a little bit more?
Sure. Maybe if I soften it a bit, is that better?
Yeah, you may have your volume too loud on your mic, and that will interfere with maybe a speaker. Yeah, but if you soften it a little bit, it may be better. We are hearing you very clear. It's just coming in with a little bit of a vibration.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you very much. All right, great.
Linda, yes to the answer of your question.
All right, if I freeze out again, will I be able to get back in using the link I used originally? Yes, you should be able to get back in using that actual link. If you cannot, just call 781-942-6663 and they'll take care of you. Our IT folks are here. They're fantastic. They are watching. They're sending us suggestions. They are absolutely supporting this operation 100%. So if you have any issue at all, go ahead and call. If you're having because then you can get back in, but you should be able to use your original link because each link is unique to each town meeting member. Okay. We are all set, sir. I'm going to mute.
Well, we have a question from Mr. DeVere. All right, go ahead, Mr. DeVere.
Jane, your son.
Hi, John, go ahead. Okay, he's got his hand raised, but not. There we go. Hello, John.
Yes, am I up and running?
Yes, you are, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, and we are good to go.
A quorum being present, this town meeting is called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. All right. Before we begin, I have a brief statement to make. Obviously, because of the pandemic, we've had to operate town meeting differently. As moderator, it has been my goal to keep operations as close as possible to the way it works when we meet in person, knowing full well that it is impossible to replicate it exactly. The inevitable differences have caused understandable variations in philosophy. Chief among them has been roll call voting. In June, the webinar software captured individual votes. Many members felt that the process effectively turned every vote into a roll call vote, despite the fact that our bylaws stipulate that roll calls are only taken when requested by 20 or more members. For this meeting, it was decided to turn off that ability to capture every vote and take a roll call only when properly requested, as we do in an in-person meeting. With that position, some members have felt that transparency was lost, since in a virtual setting, members cannot look around the room to see how everyone voted. Keep in mind that an in-person meeting does not have recorded votes except for roll calls, which are historically rare. Additionally, some members have felt that the recording of the votes in June gave those on social media the ability to harass members for their decisions they have made at town meeting. This chair does not presume to infringe on anybody's right of free speech, especially outside of this meeting, but I appeal to all members to tone things down a bit, accept that there are almost always two sides to every issue, and not to make assumptions as to why people vote the way they do. Remember, we are still all neighbors, and this is a community. For this meeting, it is too late to make any changes to the procedure. We don't have an agreed upon solution that will pass legal muster. Before the next meeting, we will examine the situation to determine if there is any common ground. Please keep in mind, however, that we all hope that this is a temporary situation, that everyone eventually will all be meeting together again. The issue will then go away. Therefore, I ask for everyone's patience. Now, for tonight's meeting, this is how we will proceed. First up is Article 13, which the proponents plan to ask for indefinite postponement. Next, we return to Article 2, where we will have 2 instructional motions. Once taken care of, we will then be able to adjourn sine die. At this point, let's see, business under Article 13. Mr. Doxer moves that we indefinitely postpone the substance of the article. Mr. LeLacheur?
Could I be allowed to share my screen?
Yep, I will stop the share. Here we go. Go ahead, Mr. LeLacheur.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, town meeting members. As it shows on page 25 of your warrant report, this article was somewhat belt and suspenders, put in as a placeholder. In fact, it is not needed. This donation of land will be made directly to Conscom, so there is no need for town meeting action. It's a gift we certainly appreciate, though. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Is there any discussion in the pack?
No.
No. Okay, none appearing. Are we ready for the vote? We will have a poll put up and you can vote. Now we can begin voting. This is
All
for
in favor
indefinite
of
postponement.
Postponement? Opposed?
All right, the polling, oh, not quite. Okay. Polling is now closed. Okay, Mr. Crook, the vote in the pack?
3 yes, 0 no.
The town clerk will tally the votes.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
4 yes.
4 yes, okay.
0 no.
So at the poll being 147 yes, 3 no, 4 yes, and 0 no at the pack being a total of 151 yes and 3 no.
Okay, the vote being 151 in the affirmative, 3 in the negative, the motion to indefinitely postpone has carried. Now we take, Mr. Doxer moves that we take Article 2 from the table. Is there a second? Second. First up, the first of the 2 instructional motions is from Ms. O'Neill. Ms. O'Neill, you have the floor.
Right. She hasn't raised her hand.
Oh, she hasn't raised her hand?
No, that's all right. I found her. There we go.
Okay,
I
there
got
we
her.
go.
There we go. Go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I move that in order to limit the increasing impacts of massive downtown buildings and provide for pocket parks, pathways, and other open space options downtown, that town meeting direct the Community Planning and Development Commission, CPDC, and town planning staff to submit to the 2021 annual town meeting an article that changes the lot coverage maximum in the 40R downtown overlay district from 100% to 85%, consistent with the underlying Business B lot coverage, and that CPDC not approve any additional 40R developments in this district until town meeting has had the opportunity to review 40R amendments this spring.
Is there a second? Second. Ms. O'Neill.
Thank you. I just want to make a few comments on this. Several years ago, town meeting approved a 40R district downtown that allowed for greater density, among other zoning overrides, and gave the town some say over design standards and some state monies. A couple of years ago, town meeting expanded this downtown 40R district. We are now beginning to have a fuller picture of what our decisions have wrought. It is time to take another look at the parameters of this zoning and consider if we want to continue down this road in the years ahead. I and many others are concerned about what will result as more parcels change hands and face new development pressures. I recommend that we start by rolling back the 100% lot coverage allowance. It is simply too much, and no developer is likely to unilaterally decide to do less than 100%. We must set some boundaries, and we must indicate our desire to have options for some green spaces, some breathing space in our downtown. We recognize the need for and desire for additional housing units and options, and recognize the value of encouraging denser development near our mass transit resources and many local businesses, retailers, and restaurants. Allowing this increased density does not and should not mean that we must sacrifice opportunities for the inclusion of some modest green and creative open spaces. I ask for your support of this instructional motion as a step in this direction. Bob, do you have a couple of slides there that you might put up for me? Just quickly, this shows the back of the former Atlantic, where it's just, as you see, a little bit bleak. The next one, please. And this is looking from the side of that up. You see how tight everything is. And again, no green. Thank you. This is actually a view from next to the 30 to 52 Haven Street and the other building. And you can see, I mean, we could have maybe opted for a little green pathway or something, again, that gives us some breathing space. And I think the last one shows us, and this is what we see at Bunratty, and that's a very pleasant place to be and just even walk through if you're going from the parking lot out to Main Street. Right now, we haven't really given ourselves the options to create any more of these in the future. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Let's see. Is there further discussion? Mr. Bonazzoli. Jane, are you on?
Unmuted. Go ahead, Mr. Bonazzoli.
Mr. Bonazzoli?
When you have triple mute on, it doesn't work, everybody. Just
There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, James Bonazzoli, Precinct 6. I want to thank Ms. O'Neill for bringing this forward, and I support it entirely. I agree with her that last year I was dismayed at looking at the square footage and the change in our community, that we've strived for to be a residential community. When I was on the board, we used to talk about kind of a sleepy neighborhood kind of community, and that's what differentiated us from the communities around us, and we took pride in that. I look around now and I see that we're no different than almost a Melrose and other urban communities. So thank you, Mary Ellen, for bringing this forward. I support you entirely and look forward to these efforts.
Okay, next is Mr. Herrick.
Go ahead, Mr. Herrick.
Thank you, Steve.
Oh, Mr. Herrick, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great. Steve Herrick, Precinct 8. I have a question about the exactly what this motion does. I just want to make sure I at least, and perhaps everyone else understands. So what we're asking here is that we are instructing CPDC to, what we're asking them to create a plan and put something on the warrant for next spring that would allow us to discuss this in more detail and then approve this. Is that, can you explain, who can explain? I don't know, Mr. Moderator or Bob, if you can help me understand exactly what it is that we're voting to happen here. I do support the motion. I just want to make sure we all know what we're voting for.
Well, this is strictly an instructional motion, but if we have a better explanation than that, raise your hand.
Mr. Moderator, I also asked Ms. O'Neill if she wants to answer that.
Okay. Oh, Ms. O'Neill. Okay.
Thank you. Mary Ellen O'Neill, Precinct 4. We don't really have any direct say over CPDC. I see this more as a request to CPD to start to take a look at this, beginning especially with the lot coverage, because 100% lot coverage for just the building, the parking alone would take up every inch of space is excessive. So I think given what we've experienced the last few years and the competing interests of, you know, denser housing, which we agree we need more housing, coupled with what we still would like to retain of the small town feeling and those kinds of things. It's really, my feeling is that this is telling town meeting that town meeting has a sense this is what we'd like to see. And since we did pass that and we are sort of the buck stops here on those zoning changes, I think we have that, you know, right to request CPDC to take a look at this.
Okay, thank you. Next is Mr. Mara.
All right.
O'Mara, excuse me.
Go ahead, Mr. O'Mara.
I'm sorry, that would have been a mistake.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, no problem. Oh, Mr. Herrick, did you have a follow-up? Oh, no, your hand's down. Or is it Ms.
No,
Herrick?
Ms. Han- Mr. Herrick, did you want to have any
No,
follow-up?
I appreciate. Thank you, Mary Ellen, for your explanation. And I say I do actually support this. I think this is the right thing to do for the downtown. I see exactly what's going on down there. We had a discussion at town meeting last year regarding setbacks, and I think this is really kind of barking up the same tree regarding how close and tight and city-like we want our downtown and Main Street area to be. And I absolutely support this, and I hope that the CPDC and Planning Committee can come to town meeting in the spring, I guess it is, with a plan to make this kind of change and something that we can really discuss and implement going forward.
Okay, next is Ms. McLaughlin Downing.
Hi, yes, thank you. Like the others, I definitely support the intent of this instructional motion. I just have a question about the last part where it says we are directing the CPDC to not approve any additional 40R developments in this district until town meeting has had the opportunity to review 40R amendments this spring. And my question is, are we allowed to do that? I mean, can a developer say, you know, I have a right to put forth this development, or I guess I just don't understand that we as town meeting have the right to tell CPDC to not approve something that would be otherwise allowable under the zoning we now have. Can you explain that more?
Do we have an opinion from town council?
Go ahead, Ivy.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Ivy. Sorry.
Okay. This is Ivrea Freed, Mr. Moderator. Yes, that's a great point. If an applicant comes to the CPDC and files for a permit under the 40R Smart Growth District bylaw, passing this motion would not affect at all CPDC's obligation under your bylaw to review the permit and issue it if necessary. The only way town meeting can put in place what's essentially requested here, a moratorium, would be through a zoning bylaw amendment.
That's what I was getting at, yes.
Right, and this is not a zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay, so I guess I don't know whether Mrs. O'Neill would consider modifying this to something that would be allowable. I think we all agree we wish the latter would happen, and we hope that would be the outcome, but I don't know if that can, well, like if you said it can't have any effect. Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
Ms. O'Neill, do you have a response?
I personally am fine with striking that last part of the instructional motion. I understand what's being said. And I think the sense of it, I mean, we don't have the legal authority to do that. So, but I'm a little concerned because I still would like the sense of it to remain. So I don't know quite what to say.
So for now, would you like to leave that in?
If someone would like to make that motion, I suppose we could discuss that and see how it went.
Mr. Moderator, there is a point of information in the chat
Okay.
from Mr. McLeod. The point of information asks, is
Oh,
the
it's
por-
binding. I see the question now. No instructional motion is actually binding. They are all just instructional, and they're not on the warrant, and there's a reason for that. But nothing is actually binding, but it's telling the town meeting or a particular body what the town meeting would like to see. Okay, all right, then we will move on. Then next is Mr. Giacalone.
Go ahead.
Hello, Michael Giacalone, Precinct 5.
Giacalone.
A question, how were these percentages determined? I'm not an engineer of any kind. I have no idea how these percentages would impact development and wonder if they received any feedback from developers to decide if something like this makes projects feasible for them. Did they think about how it would impact the parking situation, which lots are potentially the ones that are impacted by this, and what is these actual pocket parks that they're talking about? I have no idea what they're looking like. Is it about the size of a beach chair, or are they something that's much more usable space? I'm just wondering, if you put something like this in place, is it going to stifle any type of potential development that could benefit the town?
I'll call on Ms. O'Neill. Do you have a comment? Ms. O'Neill? Oh, you have to be.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Mary Ellen O'Neill, Precinct 4. Could I turn this over to another member of town meeting to speak?
Who would you like to speak on it?
David Talbot.
Okay, Mr. Talbot, are you available? Okay, Mr. Talbot.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, Mary Ellen. I'm also in support of the motion, and my understanding, having watched the process from the beginning when this was passed, was that the 3052 Haven developer, i.e. the former Atlantic site, really wanted that much. At the time, the MF Charles project was also approved, but it did not require 100%. It could have been done just as it was done with 85%. And so could have the, if it were to be proposed now, the Washington Arms, that big apartment building across the street from Maine from MF Charles, would also fit, even if it was 85% lot coverage. What this means, it allows for some kind of air and space around projects. And the reason it's an instructional motion, as I understand it, is, this isn't town meeting putting a zoning article up. It's asking the experts, i.e. the town staff and the CPDC who do this all day, to take a look at this. They've heard the feedback and come back with something that does provide for the open space. Which could be pathways, like Mary Ellen showed the picture of the nice, really beautiful seating area next to Bunratty. That's the type of thing you might want to see. But I think, given the funny lot shapes downtown, it's best to leave it to CPDC to, kind of come back with, how are we going to make sure we get more of those types of spaces? Because right now the zoning is what it is. It allows you to put 100% of the building, that's right up to the curb, right up to the back of the property, to the left, to the right. And that's exactly what we got with 3052 Haven, with the Gould Street project that's now under construction, where there's a cement block wall directly on backyards of people behind them, and with the 475 Main, where it again goes, curb to curb. It goes right to the curb on Green Street too. That's what the whole downtown will look like if you follow the natural progression of this existing zoning. That's what, zoning is the community saying, this is what I want my downtown to look like. And when you say 100% lot coverage in your zoning, you're telling that's what I want. I want only building footprints on every inch of the lot, and you will not get any guarantee that you're going to get a little patch of green, a nice walkway like the Bunratty thing, like anything like that, a setback, a little pocket park. The one that I walked down Haven Street from the train station, Rite Aid obviously is a ripe site for such a development. I don't know what's going on there. But if you look at the parking lot, you'll see a nice, some mature trees, a little green there across from 3052. That's just the kind of space that would get swallowed up with another building that goes right up to the curb if we don't do something and, allow for some open space downtown. If we don't change it, and by this means, i.e. asking CPD and town staff, I think is the right way to go about it, and let them come back with something. A zoning amendment on the spring warrant that is based on their expertise. That's what this is. It's a request for them to sort out, what is the best way to do this to ensure that we get more of these nice spaces and make the downtown as beautiful as it can be, while also allowing good, mixed use developments that have 3 stories of housing above retail that stick with that concept, but give us, the amenities and the beauty and the walkability. And in the next few months, as folks wonder about this, take a walk around 3052 Haven. If you haven't done it, maybe you could think about why you haven't, because it's not very friendly to visiting. It's very massive. It's concrete and asphalt. So that'll give you a good sense. So anyway, I've spoken too long, but the gist of it is to ask the experts to come back with ideas that make sense, that allow development, but also give us these kinds of nice amenities that make the downtown lovely to visit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on the list is Mr. Berman.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I had problems last week when we did this. So I actually really support the intent of Mary Ellen's motion. We don't want to have block by block by block massive construction. My problem with this, though, is that I think it's too prescriptive. There are some lots that lend itself that if you set it at 85%, the 15% space that you would get would not be useful. There are other lots where you could build something at 50% and you would have a very nice space. I think if we made it we're sort of by rote, 85, you can no more than 85%, you're leaving it up to individual developers to kind of just set aside space. What I would rather see is CPDC to come up with guidelines that in any 40R, if any 40R project comes before them, is basically to make developers come up with a green space plan. And that could mean maybe that would force the developer to perhaps talk to an abutting property owner. Or perhaps a solution could be that they contribute money so that money could be used to purchase one space that could be used to develop a pocket park. I think if we just sort of keep to what Mary Ellen's verbatim motion is that, we're not going to be able to take a holistic approach to the downtown. And it'll be, like I said, very prescriptive. I don't know if this could be an amendment, or Mary Ellen, if you would think this, to be sort of a friendly amendment, but rather than just sort of coming up with a certain percentage, but basically to direct CPDC to come up with a green space plan, and that also hold developers in any guidelines that they come before, with a project, to come up with sort of their solution to the green space, so that we're looking at it not parcel by parcel, but also just sort of as a holistic downtown plan. So I support them. I support the intent of what Mary Ellen's motion tries to do. I just don't think that this is the right way to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Barnes.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jonathan Barnes, Precinct 5. Can we put the instructional motion back up on the screen, please? I had the same question that a previous speaker had concerning the last part of the sentence in the motion about whether or not, given the fact that the current bylaw does permit 100%, whether or not CPDC could blanket disapprove all plans that did not conform with that. So I'm glad that that question was asked, although following the discussion, it might be, I guess, rather than have it stricken, I would suggest possibly amending it to be that portion of it be, and that CPDC discourage applications that do not include pocket parks or other open space, because I think it's important in the interim period that the message be communicated to the CPDC as well as to developers that this town, through the CPDC, encourages the inclusion of green space and open parks. Second, I generally do support the principle in this instructional motion, recognizing it is only instructional, but I think the concept is important, because I too have concerns about the impact of the massive building in the downtown smart growth district. In fact, when town meeting extended the downtown smart growth district several years ago to include some of the residential areas, I believe, including Green Street or Gould Street, I did not support that extension at the time, and I share the concern about the impact of this massive development, as well as the mass and the size of these projects. So I support the motion, but I do think it's valuable not only to have CPDC reassess this one aspect regarding green space and open space, but they may also want to reassess other aspects of the bylaw that have enabled developers to come in with and get approval for developments that are of such large scale and bulk that there is some degree of frustration and objection in the town. So I would like CPDC to actually review the entire bylaw for that purpose. Third, I'd be curious to know, I'm sure it was CPDC, as I recall, that generated the bylaw, the Downtown Smart Growth District bylaw in the first place. And I'm curious, I don't know if any of them are members of town meeting, but I would welcome an opportunity to hear from any members of CPDC as town meeting members, or if they're just here as CPDC members, they can speak as well, what their thoughts are on why it was set at 100% in the first place, and how they feel about the impact of reducing it to 85%. Or conversely, if there's any town representatives from the Community Development Department, I'd be interested in hearing from them on those points as well. Thank you.
Okay, did you actually, Mr. Barnes, are you making a proposed amendment or not?
I guess I would ask, I know it's been asked of Mary Ellen before in terms of modifying that part of it, and I know she did not want to. I guess I would just ask if she would accept that as a friendly amendment, that it say CPDC, rather than say CPDC not approve any additional 40-yard developments, it say CPDC discourage applications that do not include pocket parks or other open space, if she would accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, we can ask her. Ms. O'Neill, do you have any response to that?
Oh, yes, that's fine. It's not that I wasn't opposed to it. I just wanted someone else to suggest an amendment. So I'm definitely open to that wording, and that I would accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, I am going to ask through the chat if anybody has any problems with accepting that as Ms. O'Neill's original motion. So if you do, please say so in the chat now. Otherwise, we'll accept that as.
Wasn't exactly what I was proposing.
Oh, okay. Can we get the wording back up?
All right. Hold on, we're having a little technical difficulties here.
Yeah, I'll do my best, but this is not a file that's easy to edit.
Oh.
Yeah, hold on.
The edits were made there.
So there's the original.
I don't see it on the screen, Mr. Moderator.
I don't either. Mr. LaLacheur? Okay, here we go. There it comes.
So what I would propose is the CPDC discourage applications that do not include pocket parks or other open space.
Yeah, I think it said discouraged there, correct?
Yeah, that was there just a minute ago.
There you go.
I did.
Yes, thank you. That's what I had proposed, yes.
Okay, and I will again ask, is there an objection to this? And I think we had one from the PAC, but let me check again in case the change made a difference. Do we still have an objection in the PAC?
Still object.
Still object.
Yes,
Okay,
one
then we will have to take a vote on that. So discussion now turns to the proposed amendment. Is there any discussion on the proposed amendment?
Mr. Moderator, we're showing a number of hands up. If folks can just raise hands that want to talk about the amendment.
Yeah, these are just strictly the amendment. I have tried to make a list of the next people in line for the main motion. And okay, so it looks like Mr. O'Neill, you would like to discuss the proposed amendment?
Yes, John O'Neill, Precinct 4. I am supportive of the proposed amendment by Mr. Barnes. I think it answers some people's objections, and I think it certainly is supportive of the main intent of the instructional motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Crook, the person in the PAC that would like to speak?
Yes.
Bernie Horn at Precinct 1. Now, I guess the reason I'm not in favor of the amendment is that I believe that the wording here has to be much stronger for the CPDC. The developers in the CPDC, I'm sure, have negotiated every one of the developments that has already occurred, the result of which is to use 100% or almost every square inch in the lots. So unless we're very clear, I think that the idea that the CPDC would discourage applications, I'm sure that they've already tried to discourage applications that were not wholesome, and they've fundamentally failed in their responsibility to oversee responsible development. I was going to recommend other wording changes to this. In fact, I was going to suggest that we add further restrictions, which would be to impose the requirement that there be loading and unloading in the front or somewhere on the street side of the development. And secondly, to impose the requirement that we have 4 parking spaces for every living unit. The existing developments alone will certainly overrun the available parking spaces downtown already. And unless we impose additional parking for both public and the users or the residents of the new developments, we're going to have a much greater problem than we already have. So thank you.
And Mr. Crook, we had a second person in the PAC?
Myself, Stephen Crook, Precinct 2.
Okay.
It seems to me the problem is the CPDC is constrained by the existing zoning bylaw. So no matter what wishes we might offer in this instructional motion, until we change the bylaw, the developer is allowed to build out, for example, to 100% and so on.
Correct.
I mean, we've got to wait until we're willing to vote on a change to the bylaw before the CPDC can enforce the desires of this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Again, speaking on the proposed amendment, Mr. Talbot.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dave Talbot, Precinct 5. I support Mr. Barnes's amendment. I think it needs I'm not sure it got implemented correctly here. I think his intent was to say that the CPDC discourage, I can't really read it here, but his point, I think, is to discourage it until we have the opportunity to review actual zoning amendments in the spring, right? That's what he, not just that they discourage generally, but okay, sorry. Can you just, I'm just trying to read what it says there. What does the finished new version of this say? Yeah, I can see the challenge with editing on this particular type of form. I think what he means, he'll step up and correct me, is that the discourage applications that do not include pocket parks or other open space until town meeting has had the opportunity to review 40R amendments this spring. That's what he's changing. It doesn't end there, right?
I would suppose he means in this district.
Yeah, but he means but I think he means discourage it until April.
Yeah, but I don't think you can get rid of the in this district.
Correct. But yeah, okay. I just can't see what it looks like when it's finished.
It is very hard to see what I know there's
We have a point of order, Mr. Moderator. There's just a point of order that folks may not be able to read it. So if it can be either enlarged, I'm not sure if that's possible with this application, or if it can be read into the record.
Right. I have the same issue, but
there we go.
That's a little better. Although, did it really change it or just make it bigger?
No, I can't edit this PDF any differently than is happening.
Okay. So why don't you just read, I don't know, I hate to belabor it, but you want to just read that last 3 lines and what does it actually say?
Yeah.
Oh, and
that the CPDC, not CDC, discourage applications that do not include pocket parks or other open space in this district until town meeting has had the opportunity to review 40R amendments this spring.
Okay, yeah, that's what I understood it to mean, and I think that's a good change, and I support it. And a previous speaker was quite correct that none of this is mandatory or binding until there's a zoning amendment and we pass it in April. But we just want to be clear about what it is we're asking them to do in the spirit of this between now and April. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barnes, did you have a follow-up comment?
His hand
Sorry.
is raised.
Jonathan Barnes, Precinct 5. Yes, Mr. Talbot is entirely correct. The way it's worded now is what I had intended, and I appreciate his correcting it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Talbot, did you have a follow-up? I noticed your hand is up again.
Sorry, no, I didn't. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay. Next is on the subject of the proposed amendment, Ms. Binder.
Go ahead, Ms. Binda.
Thank you, Angela Binder, Precinct 5. I have a question. Pocket parks was removed, and I like that, pocket parks and open space. I support this amendment, and I support this in general. I think that I would like to see pocket parks put back in. I think that in general instructional motions, especially something to the CPDC, they're non-binding, but they do present a vision and a desire for what we want to see. So I appreciate Mr. Giacaloni's, Ms. Downing's, Mr. Berman's concerns about the specifics about 100% or 85%. And I think that all that will be worked out in CPDC hearings and in discussions in the hearings primarily. And then when it goes to town meeting, all of that will be worked out. But I do believe, like someone else stated, that this is an instruction, it's sort of a vision for what we want. So I would accept this motion, this change, but I wish it did say pocket parks and open space, because I don't like the idea of a developer paying money to buy a park somewhere else or something like that. I do want, if there's to be open space, that it should be part of the development and part of the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Continuing discussion on the proposed amendment, Mr. Trinello.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Tronello, Precinct 8. Following up on what Mr. Crook brought up earlier, I would be curious as to town council's input with regard to encouraging a town body to do anything other than follow the current version of our bylaw until that bylaw is duly changed and voted on by us at another town meeting. So could I ask for Ms. Freed to chime in on whether or not we want to encourage CPDC to discourage developers of doing anything that's contrary to our current bylaw?
Do we have a response from the town council?
Yes, Ivrea Freed, Town Council, Mr. Moderator. So these are, like many people have commented, instructional motions. They are not binding on CPDC. CPDC is an experienced permitting body, and they are fully aware that when an application is received, that they will review that application in accordance with the bylaw.
Thank you. Mr. Barnes, did you have another comment?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan Barnes, Precinct 5. I'm sorry to belabor the point. This is far too much time on an instructional motion, but it is, I think, important to at least have the language correct. I'm still looking at what's up there, and I think I've seen it several different iterations too many times. But what I proposed is, with Mr. Talbot's improvements, is that section should read that CPDC discourage applications, and those are applications under the 40R district, discourage applications that do not include pocket parks or other open space until town meeting has had the opportunity to review 40R amendments in this spring. That's what I was proposing, and I don't see that language up there, although I do see, I guess Bob is writing it now, that discourage applications that do not include pocket parks or other open space until town meeting has had the opportunity to review 40R amendments this spring.
Okay, I believe that is what you said the first time around, so we will put that in there. Next, Mr. Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Berman, Precinct 4. I think this is a much better cut and goes to what I was talking about in terms of really what this does. It really puts the onus on the developer to come up with an open space plan with the guidance of CPDC. The problem that I have is that it still sort of makes it prescriptive in that it's setting a certain percentage of open space. Like I said earlier, there are some parcels that will lend itself to more open space, some with less. And I think making it formulaic kind of makes it difficult to kind of take a comprehensive approach, although this amendment really does get at it better in that it's discouraging applications that go lot line to lot line and that don't include parks or open space. So therefore, I don't think you need the percentage part. So I think we're getting there, and I don't think that we need to sort of, limit it to a percentage.
Thank you. On the proposed amendment, Ms. Thomas's. Jeannie Thomas's. Oh, seems to be gone now. Oh, she's still, oh, okay. You muted? Okay. Okay. All right. Her hand seems to be lowered. So next is, let's see, Ms. Snow Doxer. Okay.
Hi, Linda Snow Doxer, Precinct 1. Thank you, Mr. Moderator and tech team, exclamation point. And thank you also, Mary Ellen O'Neill, for starting this important conversation. I do support this work. I'm wondering, I have a couple of, I hope friendly amendments, having listened to all of the contributions. I really appreciate all the contributions. I'm wondering, Mr. Crook mentioned that nothing can happen without zoning changes. So I'm wondering if a friendly amendment might be to include in the line that says town meeting directs the Community Planning and Development Commission and town planning staff to add there to work with the zoning bylaw committee to submit to the 2021 annual town meeting. So
Well-
that would just add in the team that needs to work together on it.
Okay, I, since everything has been, people just want to discuss on each piece of this, I will wait until we've dispensed with this amendment, and then I will come back to you to make that proposed amendment.
Mr. Moderator, if I might.
Mr. LaLacheur?
Yeah, there is no such thing as the zoning bylaw committee. CPDC is the body that would bring a zoning bylaw to town meeting.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and I will come back to you on that. Okay.
Thank you. Well, that, I don't need that then.
Oh, okay, okay.
The other question that I had, that I also think is a friendly amendment, deals with the language that has apparently been troublesome in terms of directing the word that says the town meeting, let's see, consistent with the underlying business B lot coverage, and that CPDC not approve, instead of saying CPDC not approve, insert town meeting asks that CPDC not approve. Now, I'm not sure how that jives now with how it's changed, but instead of directs, it would be asks.
Lord help me.
Okay, again.
I'm sorry. Like I said, thank you to the tech team, which includes you guys.
Okay, I will come back to you on that so we can keep straight what we are voting on. And next is Mr. Dewar. Okay, we're calling on Mr. Dewar right now. Oh, it was a second ago.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I had my hand up in error. I apologize.
Oh, no problem at all. Okay, next, it looks like Mr. Arena. Oh, yeah, actually, yep. Mr. Arena?
Thank you, Alan. John Arena, Precinct 1. A couple of thoughts on the amendment. Zoning is really hard to do, and Julie Mercier and Jean Delios and the rest of the town staff, when we were on the board, worked tirelessly to get the 40R district and its expansion, along with the CPDC, to get the language developed. And it took multiple rounds, and you might remember there were periodic amendments. I like the spirit of what's in front of us here. And in particular with the amendment, I fear that while we are all saying that this is instructional, most of the discussion has been over the specifics of trying to make the instructional motion very particular. I would suggest politely that maybe we vote this particular proposed amendment down, return to the main body, and simply direct CPDC to return with a proposed change that reduces the current lot coverage maximum. Most of the discussion then will happen in CPDC meetings, and all of the elements that we're talking about here tonight can be factored in. There'll be open meetings where all of these can be raised. But I think trying to do this, we've done this many times, trying to legislate in town meeting is really hard to do, especially so with zoning. So I would respectfully, I like the spirit of this, would respectfully vote the proposed amendment down, return to the main body, and simply suggest CPDC to come back with a proposal for reduced ceiling of build out maximum. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mon.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jamie Maughan, Precinct 4. I call the question on the amendment to the instructional motion.
Okay, is there a second? Second. We have a motion before us to end debate on the proposed amendment. Can we have a poll put up for that? It requires a 2/3 vote and it is non-debatable. Oh, and there's the vote in front of you now.
Alan, I thought the amendment was friendly.
No, we were actually voting on it because we had people who
Okay.
were opposed to it.
All opposed to ending debate.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. The time. Okay, and the vote at the PAC.
3 yes, 2 no.
3 and 2 no. Okay, the town clerk will tally the vote. The vote being 137 in the affirmative, 19 in the negative, the motion to end debate carries. We will now proceed to the vote on the proposed amendment. If we could have the poll up.
Is this the amendment?
This is
or
the
full
amendment.
motion?
This is not the full motion. This
Sorry.
is only, this is, yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Want to restart that?
Amendment. Yep.
Yep, that's it. Okay, and if we could have the vote at the PAC?
2 yes, 3 no.
2 yes and 3 no, and the town clerk will tally the vote.
108 yes, 2 no, 38. Let me start that again. 108 yes, 38 no. 2 at the PAC is yes and 3 no. So that's 110 yes and 41 no.
The vote being 110 in the affirmative for the proposed amendment and 41 opposed, the motion carries and the motion has been amended. We now return to discussion on the main motion. I tried to take the order of people where they were at the time. I will give this a try. It looked like first, yes?
Mr. Moderator, we have
Yes.
a couple of things. First of all, we have a point of order that the Microsoft Word version is good, but having difficulty seeing it. We notify that the town clerk is having difficulty hearing the town clerk.
How about now?
You sound great to me. That's better. Yep.
Okay, good, good.
And then we also have a request to remind the body what the amendment was, or remind of the language before. There's a lot of discussion before that vote. So just a couple of things that are coming from here. And we have a motion from Jeffrey Beckwith, but we're looking for a point of order in the chat. We're looking for points of order in the chat, not motions.
Okay, so we now have the amended motion before us. Is that correct?
Okay, now we have a point of order from Mr. Beckwith.
Okay, let's call on Mr. Beckwith for his point of
Mr.
order.
Beckwith, would you raise your hand, please? There we go. Mr. Beckwith, please proceed with your point of order.
I move the question.
That's
That is not a point of order. That's, that, you have to wait in line to do that. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so we are back to the main motion. The order that I saw at the time that we went off to the amendment, it looked like Mr. O'Rourke was first. So if we can call on Mr. O'Rourke.
Mr. O'Rourke, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom O'Rourke, Precinct 2. I'd like to also support the instructional motion from Ms. O'Neill. COVID-19, the past 9 months, has taught us a lot of things about a lot of things, and in particular about the value of slowing down, focusing on our surroundings, and that includes our property, here in Reading, and also taught us the value and importance of more attractive open space for all our residents to gather or view as we walk through the town or drive by. So again, I'd like to offer my support.
Thank you. Next on the list was Mr. DeRezzo.
One moment, please. Mr. DeRizzo. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tony DeRezzo, Precinct 2, and Associate Member of CPDC. I'd like to read a statement from Julie Mercer, the Community Development Director. This is one of the many potential changes that may be warranted to the downtown smart growth district zoning, and changing lot coverage and isolation may have unintended consequences. As such, staff would prefer to take this up as part of a holistic review of the downtown smart growth district zoning. Further, while this timeframe is technically possible, April is just around the corner and will not afford CPDC or staff the time to conduct the robust public process or iterative internal CPD thought processes that we typically like to have in the lead up to the ZBL amendment. For those of you who don't know, I believe the warrant closes mid-February for the April town meeting. We also need to have the discussions, a 2-week notice for the public, and then the public hearings. So yes, it could be done, but more than likely any significant changes would have to actually come up in the next year's November town meeting. I would like to point out that we have discussed this motion and the next one at the last CPDC meeting. We have added additional meetings this year and are including more next year, specifically for zoning discussions as opposed to plans. So whether this is approved or not, we will still be looking at the downtown smart growth district and seeing what improvements we can make. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on my list was Mr. Ross. Ed Ross, I think it is. Hands not raised. Okay, we'll move on. Mr. Sullivan was next.
Here's a summary from Wikipedia. The term bond is used in German language surveys.
I don't have Mr. Sullivan's hand raised either.
Okay, then Mr. Arena was next. This was on the main motion before we went to the amendment. Mr. Arena was next.
Mr. Arena, he does not have his hand raised right now.
Okay, I think we're going to go back to the list as we see it now then.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Fournier is next.
Thank you, Eric Fournier, Precinct 6. I was hoping to extend a friendly amendment to Ms. O'Neill to potentially remove the word massive from the definitions here of the proposed the proposal. Just one of the concerns that I have is that without any specification in a definition of what actually constitutes massive buildings, I think we're limiting ourselves. So I would just ask Ms. O'Neill if she would be okay with removing that word.
Well, let's first ask Ms. O'Neill if she would be okay with that.
I'd prefer to leave it or some equivalent just to indicate we're not, talking about every single building or smaller buildings. I don't want to just take it out doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make it sound.
Okay, we'll go back to Mr. Fournier then.
Ms. O'Neill, I can appreciate the intent of this, and I certainly understand where you're coming from, but without a definition of what constitutes massive or have any type of specification of the buildings, I can't stand for it. I will support this amendment or this proposal going forward, but I think without any type of specification, this is a very difficult endeavor.
Okay, I would remind town meeting members that these are instructional motions. Next on the list, hand raisings, Mr. McKenzie.
Yes, thank you. Bruce McKenzie, Precinct 8. Earlier, there was discussion as to whether we were overstepping the bounds of an instructional motion. So I'd like to suggest that on line 2, the word direct be replaced with the words recommends that. And I ask this be a friendly amendment to Mary Ellen. And I think we should go ahead and vote on this and let CPDC work out the details and the timing. And they certainly could come back in either the spring or November, because this is just just a recommendation. Thank you.
All right, again, we'll ask Ms. O'Neill if she is okay with that change, and if not, we will accept it as a proposed amendment.
Oh,
Ms. O'Neill?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just had to unmute myself. Thank you. That's fine with me. And if there's a change that someone would like to make in terms of the timing of this, I would accept that too, because I understand, working backwards, that this is probably not a workable timeline. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any objection to that small change being made? If so, put it in the chat, and then I will ask the PAC as well. Not appearing? Then we will accept that as part of the main motion. Okay, next on the list is Mr. Carnahan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Joe Carnahan, Precinct 6. I would like to move the question, please.
Okay, that is a non-debatable motion that requires a 2/3 vote. Can we put the poll up to end debate? Thank you very much. Okay, begin voting. And Mr. Crook, the vote at the PAC?
4 yes, 1 no.
All right, and polling has ended. The town clerk will record the vote.
We have 4 yes and 1 no from the PAC, and from the poll, 127 yes, 22 no, with a total of 131 yes, 23 no, and we do meet the 2/3.
Vote being 131 in the affirmative, 23 in the negative, the motion to end debate carries. We will now move to the main motion as amended. Can we have the poll put up? We are now voting on the main motion.
Mr. Moderator, I'm going to go ahead and lower all the hands.
And the vote in the PAC?
4 yes, 1 no.
All right, the town clerk will tally the votes.
The poll being 115 yes, 38 no, 4 yes, and 1 no at the PAC, with a total of, I can't do this one in my head.
It's like 119 in the affirmative and 39 in the negative. The motion on the instructional motion?
No, hold on. It's 150. 150, well, I'm sorry, you're right, 119 and 39.
Right. The vote being 119 in the affirmative and 39 in the negative, the motion on the instructional motion carries. We move on to our second instructional motion. Mr. Pacino.
Okay, hold on, let me find Mr. Pacino. Go ahead, Mr. Pacino.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Phil Pacino, Precinct 5. I asked Bob that you put up the PowerPoint presentation that I've emailed in to you, please.
Do we have the motion to put up first?
It'll be the second page of the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, good enough.
Okay. Okay, you put it up as a Word document too.
Yeah, here's the motion as a Word document, just so I'm prepared. And the
Okay.
presentation's ready when you want it, Phil.
Yeah, so why don't you put it up, please? If you put it up, please.
Okay, well, you make the motion first and then we will.
All right. Move to instruct the select board in conjunction with the Community Planning and Development Commission and the Board of Health to develop rules and regulations related to short-term rentals. Such rules and regulations should address short-term rentals such as Airbnb, VRBO. Such change should involve occupancy requirements, health and safety inspections, a violation complaint and appeal process, and fee requirements.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second, thank you. Okay, Mr. Pacino, put up your presentation.
The PowerPoint presentation afterwards, please. Okay, so go to the second page, Bob. Third page. So here's the purpose of the what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to maintain the integrity and character of the property being rented in terms by the Airbnbs and the other anytime short-term rentals. And I'm also trying to regulate the property maintenance, safety, and have health conditions at this point. I'm particularly concerned with guidelines to follow for short-term rentals by owners who do not reside in the property they're being rented. Now I bring this up, I live in Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is near includes the railroad station. We have a lot of development that's going in Precinct 5. We have the apartments across from the town, from the railroad station. We also have developments that are going on Haven Street at this point. We talked about at our meeting last week about additional water and sewer improvements for some of those properties there. So we've got quite a bit of properties that are going on here now. And that really is kind of the purpose of what we're trying to do. If you go to the next slide, Bob. So I'm going to read you a couple things that are right out of the zoning bylaws at this point. The first is a definition of a home occupation. A business conducted within a dwelling unit that is accessory to the primary residential use and carried on by a resident of the dwelling unit. I'm also going to read a second one, hotel or motel, a building in which lodging is offered to guests on a transient basis for compensation. Now, home occupation is allowed in the residential districts, the 3 residential districts plus the PRD and the PUD. But you can see what I've put up here, and I've highlighted it on the section 5.4.4. A resident of the dwelling should be permitted to rent rooms in a dwelling, to furnish rooms in the dwelling up to 3 persons who are not merely casual or transient customers. And I stress the word casual or transient customers. This is in the present zoning bylaws at this point. And this is basically saying that, you know, if you're a casual or a transient customer, that would not be considered a home occupation, and not considered the accessory use in the home occupation. And I do list the legal case here, Lido versus Swyak. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to play one here tonight, but this is a legal case out of the town of Hull, where a resident was using short-term rentals, and he basically went to court because the town was asked to cease and desist, and basically the town got supported in this case. Now, whether or not that case would apply here, again, I'm not a lawyer, nor am I going to play one here. If you go to the next page, Bob, please. I've highlighted here some police complaints. You know, you can see back, you know, on 5/29, there was some loud noise complaints that came into the police. On 5/31, there was some midnight loud noise complaints. That same night, that same place, there was loud complaints. There were 25 to 30 people at a party. The police actually came and dispersed that group at this point. And then on 8/8/220, there was loud noise complaints again. All complaints related to short rentals. It's my understanding that all these rentals are owned by owners who are not residents of the town of Reading. They do not live in those units. From residents, they tell me there was a lack of face mask and social distancing observed by residents of the building. Go to the next one too, Bob. Nope. So I've kind of done some looking around at different towns, what they're doing. You know, in terms of some of the possible guidelines that could be put in place. First off, you know, there should be some sort of registration with the town. All the other towns have actually put in place some sort of registration, which would include fees. Now, the fees can vary. Some towns charge more if you're an out-of-town resident, if you don't own, if you're not living in the property. Some of them charge less at this point. Basically, the city of Boston has taken the position, and Airbnb in their negotiation with them says if you don't register with the city of Boston, we're going to take down your listing off their website. Some towns have maximum ownership, otherwise you can only own so many units in the particular town. They also have an emergency contact within 1 hour of contact. Now, certainly in that case where I talked about the loud noise and the dispersement of the crowd, you know, maybe the police would contact the owner and say, hey, you know what's going on in your property at this point. And really on that, I do want to make the point on that, the loud noise is that from looking at that listing, from what I understand, the owner on the website says no noise, no parties, but they are not on the premises to know that. The other one is there should be some good neighbor information. You know, the other owners in the building should know who you are, where you are, you know, and what you're all about. You know, just not bring people in and, you know, we don't see you. There should be, some of the towns have put in occupancy requirements. Minimum of 3-night stays was some of the towns down the Cape are doing at this point. There's also some requirements for trash removal. Certainly if there's a party, there was a lot of trash, from what I understand. There also should be some sort of health and safety inspections that are in place. And the final is, you know, in order to protect the rights of those particular owners, you know, I don't want to be onerous. There should be some sort of violation complaint and appeal process at which they could come into place. So these are some of the guidelines. Next slide, Bob, please. So there's also a revenue aspect to the town here. In December of 2018, the Governor Baker signed a bill to tax and regulate short-term rentals to come into effect. What I've got listed here is actually off of the Airbnb website that talks about taxes. The city of Boston actually can charge an excise or a convention tax, in other words, a room occupancy tax, may apply to listing. And basically is also, you know, they list right off there that the common requires that basically Airbnb collect that tax and remit it over to the city of Boston. Additionally, you know, it would be the Massachusetts state law requires that you register with the state's Department of Revenue. So my intent here is not to try to eliminate these short-term rentals. That's not my intent. And my intent is not if you're living in the home, you know, that's not my intent. I don't have a problem with those people who are living in their homes and use it for Airbnb. What I'm saying is we just need to create some sort of orderly maintenance, safety and health processes. Because right now, if I look at the zoning bylaws, you could basically make the case that anybody who's doing a Airbnb in the residential district is basically is in violation of the zoning bylaws. I thank you, Mr. Moderator, and I'm open for questions and comments from the members.
Okay, is there further discussion? Mr. Berman.
Go ahead, Mr. Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Berman, Precinct 4. The town, in its infinite wisdom, years and years ago, when the state legislature basically abrogated their responsibility to pay local aid and enabled cities and towns to enact supplemental legislation to collect a surcharge for meals and hotels. We adopted the hotel tax, even though we didn't have any hotels at the time. So now that the governor has signed that legislation, my question maybe to Bob or someone on the town staff is, are we monitoring these Airbnb, requiring them to register? And have we collected, as which we're allowed to under the legislation, any of the fees that are part of that? Is Airbnb helping us with that?
Mr. LaLachère?
Yeah, only today did I even imagine that the hotel tax might apply to these. So no, we're absolutely not monitoring them or collecting any fees or taxes.
Okay.
As maybe as a follow-up, as part of this, if we can, I don't know, Phil, if you want to take this as a friendly amendment, but to encourage the town under its right, because we have adopted that enabling legislation, to monitor and collect taxes as we're entitled to.
Mr. Pacino, do you have any comments?
All right, I'll unmute myself.
Oh, there we are. Okay.
Okay, I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah.
I certainly would take any friendly amendment that Mr. Berman wants to propose here. If he comes up with the wording. I think it's a revenue source for the town in these times, and especially where under the rules, the Airbnb would collect it and remit it. It's not like we'd have to go, not like you'd have to potentially chase the owners of the property.
Okay, is this does this look like it says what you meant, Mr. Berman?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any objections to that being part of the main motion? If so, put your objection in the chat. And I will also ask Mr. Crook at the PAC if there are any objections.
No objections.
No objections. Okay. It looks like Mr. Beckwith, you had a point of order? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Oh, we do have an objection. Okay. That was before. Okay. We do have an objection, so that means we need to make this a formal amendment. Is there a second? Second. Okay, discussion now turns to the proposed amendment. Okay.
We're not
Is
voting
there
on the amendment.
Not yet. Not yet. Okay. Is there further discussion on just the proposed amendment? Okay, Ms. Wiggins. Oh, no, I guess not. Okay, Mr.
She lowered her
Bonasoli.
hand.
Yeah, okay, Mr. Bonasoli.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. James Bonasoli, Precinct 6. I get the intent and I appreciate the intent. I just don't, I assume based on this motion, we're implying that we should hire somebody, because this would be their full-time job, to check these sites on a daily basis and make sure that we're collecting the appropriate fees. I just don't see that being something we can do, especially today. And so I'm against this amendment and motion.
Okay, further discussion on the proposed amendment. Mr. Mon.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jamie Mon, Precinct 4. A question for probably for town council. Do we have the authority under current bylaws to do this? Because as Mr. Pacino points out, our bylaws seem to prohibit this type of activity. So if our bylaws prohibit it, how can we possibly collect fees or taxes? And then the also part of that question, what fees and what tax base would we collect? How that has not been specified. So to me, this would not be implementable, but I would like town council's read on this question.
Do we have a response from town council?
Yes, Ivrea Freed, town council, Mr. Moderator. So I'll address the first question about whether it's legal to adopt a bylaw that would address Airbnb VRBOs, which are also referred to as short-term rentals? The answer to that is yes. In 2019, the state amended various statutes to permit communities to adopt a zoning bylaw and also a general bylaw regulating short-term rentals. I would say that the majority of communities throughout the Commonwealth have done it through the zoning bylaw. So if Reading had an appetite to address these types of uses, we would recommend that it's done through an amendment to the zoning bylaw. In terms of your second question about whether it's legal to collect fees, the state also addressed that by expanding the room occupancy tax to cover short-term rentals. So if the town currently collects under, I think it's section 3, you would automatically be getting tax on short-term rentals. Short-term rentals are required to register with the state, and fees are remitted that way and are directed to the town directly. The town doesn't play a role in monitoring or collecting it. It's all done through DOR and then provided directly to the town. So I don't believe that it would be an added burden on the town to collect that. In terms of how much, that varies depending on what the town seeks to regulate. You can, and I don't know off the top of my head what percentage tax Reading collects under its room occupancy tax, because it's a local option, but you're allowed to collect up to 6%. So that would apply to short-term rentals as well. You cannot adopt a different rate for short-term rentals versus regular hotels, B&Bs, and more traditional lodging establishments. The same amount must apply to all. And then on top of that, there's an ability to collect an additional 3% on top of the 6% for certain types of short-term rentals. And without getting into too much detail, those rentals are generally larger short-term rentals that are operated by a corporation, an individual that might own multiple units within the same town. So the fee structure is something that can be investigated as well, but it's a flat rate that's equal to the amount of your excise tax that's collected through DOR is sort of the short answer there.
Okay, thank you, but I do have a follow-up. I understand that we could pass a bylaw, but as I understand this amendment, this is to encourage the town right now, before we pass the bylaw, to monitor and collect fees.
Right, and like we talked about previously, these are instructional motions. There's no legal authority to collect anything. Well, sorry, backing up. If you're already collecting under your room excise tax, if you've already adopted that local option statute and you're collecting, short-term rentals within the town of Reading are required to pay taxes to the state, which will then come back to the town. So the town does not have to do anything. If they're already collecting a room excise tax, you are getting money from short-term rentals. So I think that the amendment here in terms of collecting fees, I mean, it's either happening or it's not. It depends on whether the town has adopted the local excise tax. And I defer to this Bob and other people within town that may know more than I do on that.
Mr. Moderator, if I may.
Yes.
Ivrea, when you mentioned section 3, is that what you refer to, the room occupancy tax?
Correct, the local option statute. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I may not be aware of what's going on, but my understanding is we adopted something 20 or more years ago and we've never collected under it. There are no hotels in Reading.
Right, let me just look at, I have DLS's website up. Let me just check to see whether DLS believes the town.
Okay.
So DLS believes that in 1989, the town of Reading adopted the room excise tax at 4%. So to the extent that there are short-term rentals within the town of Reading, they should be registered with the state, and 4% of any unit rental fee should be coming back to the town of Reading. And that's something, you know, within the you know, I'll defer to the select board, but if they would like, we are happy to investigate that.
Okay, thank you. Next on the list, Ms. Fiddler-Carey.
Go ahead, Ms. Fiddler-Carey.
Hi, thank you. So I have an Airbnb. I'm one of the people in town. I have an in-law apartment on my house, and my understanding is we couldn't rent that out, which we wouldn't want to do anyway, because we really like the temporary option for renting out the Airbnb. However, I also believe in taxes, so I actually support any additional fees. I know that we've got a hotel tax in Reading, and I would be fine, amenable to paying whatever I owe for whatever earnings I get on the Airbnb. That said, everything that people have said in the past about the difference between an owner-occupied Airbnb, where it's a room in a house, or, you know, like mine, a little apartment attached to the house, is a very different feel than an not owner-occupied apartment in an apartment building. I remember somebody standing up at a select board meeting, I think last year, explaining exactly what it felt like to have sort of different people coming by your apartment on, you know, a frequent basis. And that's definitely not community building in the same way that neighborhoods are. Whereas where mine is, people know they're coming to stay in my house, so they're not treating it as much like a hotel as they are treating it sort of like visiting someone's house. So it's very different feeling and situation. So I wonder if adding at some point, so if we're just talking about to also encourage the town to monitor and collect related fees, I'm speaking as an Airbnb host that I say that I support fees. If that's what, if that contributes to the town, I think that that's fair. But then just in general on the Airbnb discussion, I think maybe adding the owner occupied designation might be what we're looking for.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Arena.
Hi, John Arena, Precinct 1. I have a question for Town Council. Ms. Freed, does Mearison Harrington have experience in this area with other towns where maybe template language or other requirements might be reviewed rather than us creating them anew?
Absolutely. We've assisted other communities in drafting either regulations or bylaws for short-term rentals. I hesitate to just tell a community that a template is the best option. Everything should be tailored for the specific community to make sure that it reflects the goals of that municipality. But we are happy to work with the town if this is the direction that the town would like to go in.
Yeah, I didn't mean template literally, but just to get the four corners of the discussion, it's helpful to have somebody that's walked through it once. So thank you. You've answered my question.
Okay, thank you. Next, Ms. Doctor.
Go ahead, Ms. Doctor.
Nancy Doctor, Precinct 1. I just want to follow up something that another speaker talked about on Monday. In Article 4, we actually had to approve an increase for staffing for the health department. So I guess I would want to know a little bit more from the town manager. How would we afford the position to cover this? Would it be created through an enterprise fund from the taxes for this? I like the intention of this article, but without knowing how would we financially do this without the staff, I'm going to have to vote against it. Thank you.
Okay. Next is, let's see, Ms. Binda.
Thank you, Angela Binda, Precinct 5. I have a question related to Mr. Pacino's presentation. I thought that what he put up said that this isn't allowed in our bylaw. I don't have any problem with what he's putting up, but I'm just wondering if it's actually not allowed in our bylaw, then how do you develop rules and regulations related to something that we don't allow? So
Okay, again, keep in mind, we are talking about the proposed amendment.
So the proposed amendment, so we would have to change that portion of the zoning bylaw too, is that correct?
Do we have an answer?
Ivrea Freed, Mr. Moderator, Town Council.
Ms. Freed.
So without having reviewed your zoning bylaw for this specific issue, I can't opine on whether or not it is or is not allowed. But to the extent that it is not allowed, you would have to amend your zoning bylaw. That's the process that the town would have to go through.
Okay, so that would be the first step. So it's not just that we have to develop rules and regulations. We have to examine whether or not these are even in compliance with our zoning bylaw.
Yes.
Correct. And if it is determined that this is allowed use under the zoning bylaw, then you can consider whether regulations would be appropriate, but that first step would need to occur.
Thank you.
Mr. Pacino.
So my intent here, I did not want to use the word specific zoning changes. I use kind of rules and regulations with the idea that, you know, the CPDC and the, you know, the select board would kind of get together and say, you know, let's look at the zoning bylaws. What do we need to do? How should we handle this? You know, I didn't want to use the words exactly, but the intent is to kind of get the ball rolling here so that we, you know, what we need to do in order to do this. I mean, you certainly can make the case and, you know, that right now if you have an Airbnb or a VRBO, say that fast several times, that you're actually in violation of the zoning laws. And again, there's a precedent case out of Hull that, you know, can back this up. Now, whether or not that case would apply in Reading, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer at this point, but the idea would be to get the ball rolling at this point and see what, if there needs to be some sort of zoning change. You know, my intent is to try to, you know, not eliminate, you know, these type of arrangements. The intent is to kind of bring them into some sort of orderly process at this point in terms of what my intent is here. Thank you.
Next is Mr. Friedman.
Yes, Andy Friedman, Precinct 4. I share Nancy Doctor's concern about how the Board of Health and the Human Health Services will be able to enforce any requirements we may put on these Airbnbs. I also wonder if we should consider an amendment to have this exclude owner-occupied Airbnbs.
Okay, we can come back to that after we have disposed of the current amendment before us.
Oh, sorry. Yep, thank you.
No problem. Next is Mr. McLeod.
Sure. I think the issue that people are construing what I believe what the bylaw actually gives is a right to a certain type of rental, which is the non-transient rental. I think it stays silent on whether transient rentals are allowed, so that in the future we could put restrictions on, but I don't believe people conducting transient rentals now are in violation of the bylaw. They're just not using the safe harbor that's provided by the portion of the bylaw that was cited by the original motion maker. And so as such, I think we'd be well within our rights to try to capture the revenue. As for the rest of it, I share the concerns expressed by Ms. Doctor and others that the amount of administrative burden that we would put on the town would probably obviate the revenue that we would get from the funds.
Okay,
Thanks.
Next, Mr. Leet.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, and as it relates to the amendment, I think from what Bob mentioned a few minutes ago, it sounds like we have the power to collect fees and taxes, and it seems like if we're going to have even a regulated short-term rental option in this town, then we should probably tax and fee it to the utmost that we can, because obviously revenue's kind of an issue here. So I'm fully in favor of the amendment, and if I can, I would move to vote on said amendment.
You cannot do that after
Fair enough.
debating. Fair enough. Okay, so next we will go to Mr. Cool.
Hear me?
Yes.
Stephen Cool, Precinct 6. Full disclosure, I have no short-term rental interest in the town. So, except for the rare noise complaint, I gather that short-term rentals have not been a financial, regulatory, or let's say social burden on the town. And it seems to me that imposing fees or taxes on this activity would be unfair and discriminatory and simply a means of gathering money in return for which those paying the fees or taxes would receive no benefit. So I would oppose any further regulation. Thank you.
Okay, next, Mr. Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Berman, Precinct 4. I just want to reiterate here that us collecting the fees that are due to us will require zero effort from the town. It would work like the meals tax, where basically restaurants register, they pay the fee directly to the Department of Revenue, and the Department of Revenue reimburses the town for its share that it collects. The only thing that we need to make sure that we do is make sure that anybody who has an Airbnb or VRBO listing is registered so that those taxes can be collected. We did this, on our foresight 31 years ago to do it. We did it so long ago, we forgot we did it. And we can actually have gone to 6%, we went to 4%, but it requires no action on our part to take any votes. It requires no action for us to implement any zoning changes. We've already done that. We just have to collect what's out there. And all we need to do is just make sure that any listing is registered and collect our check from the DOR. It requires zero effort on our part.
Mr. Pagliuca.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Fultz. Mr. Berman just clarified exactly what I was going to try to say, which is based on the presentation, it appeared that this happens automatically. So if it does, what is it that the town needs to monitor and collect? If it happens the way the state intends it to, taxes get filed to DOR then sends the money to the town accordingly. So Mr. Berman stole my thunder, but as long as we're under that agreement, I make a motion to make a vote on the amendment.
Okay, you cannot do that after making a comment. You can only rise to move the question if that's what you wanted to do. So next is Mr. Beckwith.
Go ahead, Mr. Beckwith.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Jeff Beckwith, Precinct 6. Just wanted to make a comment that this is not about a question of whether or not to collect the taxes. The state law requires the vendors or the platforms, Airbnb and VRBO and others, to make sure that the taxes are collected and submitted. And while according to DLS statistics, it's only a few $1,000s for Reading, that's not the question before us. The question is whether or not we want to have CPDC develop a bylaw, regulations, or rules that would govern just how these take place in the town. There are examples all throughout Massachusetts where there are businesses that are purchasing property and operating hotels, essentially pretending as though they're owner occupied, but they're not. This is just I think a good.
Keep in mind, we're discussing just the proposed amendment right now.
Okay, well, the point is I don't think the amendment's needed, and I think that the main motion does the trick. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Moderator, we have a point of order.
Mr. Herrick, point of order.
Mr. Herrick, please raise your hand. Thank you. All right.
You dealt with it. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Where are we? Ms. Joelson.
I move the question to a vote.
Okay, the question has been moved to end debate on the proposed amendment. This requires a 2/3 vote and it is non-debatable. So we will have the poll put up. This amendment, this is to end debate on the amendment. Okay, can we have the vote at the PAC?
3 yes, 1 no.
Okay, and the town clerk will tally the votes.
With the poll being 134 yes, 9 no. The PAC is 3 yes, 1 no, with a total of 137 yes and 10 no.
The vote being 137 in the affirmative, 10 in the negative, the motion passes to move the question. We will now move on to the vote on the proposed amendment. And that amendment adds the words to also encourage the town to monitor and collect any related fees or taxes. And can we have the poll put up?
Nope.
Nope.
It's the vote on the amendment to the motion.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Amy's fixing it.
This says 1, but it's supposed to be 2.
Okay.
Okay. Just to be clear, this is the proposed amendment that's before us on the screen.
Did everybody get that?
Okay, and the vote in the PAC is?
2 yes, 2 no.
All right, and the town clerk will tally the votes.
Poll being 103 yes, 45 no. The PAC is 2 yes and 2 no, being 105 to 47.
The vote being 105 in the affirmative, 47 in the negative, the motion carries and the main motion is amended. We now return back to discussion on the main motion. Is there any discussion? Mr. Herrick.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. So there's a lot of characterization here I think I need to understand. So first off, is there somebody who could tell me exactly what is a short-term rental? I'm sure there are quite a few people in the town of Reading who rent their houses or dwellings out on a some sort of basis. It could be on a month-to-month basis. It could be go on for years and years. But what's the definition of a short-term rental? Can our town council or someone else answer that question for me? I have more questions, by the way.
Do we have an answer?
Ivrea Freed, Town Council, Mr. Moderator.
Ms. Freed.
Chapter 64G, Section 1 is where you will find the definition of short-term rental. And speaking briefly, it's defined as an occupied property where at least one room or unit is rented out through the use of advanced reservations. There are numerous exemptions to that. Hotel, motel, lodging house, bed and breakfast are all exempt, as well as other establishments like colleges, institutions, religious dormitories. So it is a bit broader. There's more detail, but generally where one room or unit is rented out through the use of advanced reservations, the property will qualify as a short-term rental.
Thank you. Mr. Herrick?
So yes, as a follow-up to that, I guess the pertinent question here is I'm trying to get a scope on what we're actually talking about. do we have any idea at this point what this volume of what we're talking about as short-term rentals actually is? I mean, Reading is a lovely town, but I don't exactly see us as a vacation destination. And notwithstanding, I understand the points made by Mr. Pacino, and I understand the issue there, but we're really only talking about a handful of incidents, 2 of which may have been the same incident. What are we really? How many of these things do we know? Do we have any data to? What are we really talking? What's the volume here? Because that when we're talking about taxing and revenue, I mean, if we're talking about 5 or 10 or 20 versus 100 or 300 or 400, it's really changes the scope of the discussion quite a bit. Does anybody, and I would ask Phil if he has any information on this, or anybody else perhaps in the town side, that do we have any insight into what's going on here? And I do have one more question after this, and I'll shut up.
Mr. Pacino, do you have a response?
Yeah, so my understanding is, at least the last time I looked, there were listed, I believe, 5 to 10 Airbnbs in Reading. My concern again is, I live in precinct 5. I live near the railroad station. There's a lot of development that's going on in precinct 5, and I'm concerned about what we're going to have more of a future effect than what the effect may be, right at this moment. Again, we've got, developments on Haven Street, we've got Gould Street, we've got the units across from the railroad station. You've got the St. Agnes property that is now condos. So I'm concerned about more of a future effect than I am about the effect as to what it is today. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. There was a comment in the chat that says that Airbnb shows 5 properties in Reading today. Next up is Mr. Bonazzoli. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Herrick. I'm sorry. You said you had one.
I'm sorry. I had one final question, and thank you very much for that. So the final question I have is what we're talking about here in terms of regulation, in terms of taxation. And I understand the point that currently we're really talking about what effectively amounts to pennies. And this is really a forward-looking view. We're trying to get ahead of the curve here. But the other question becomes like, how do we really know who is renting? I'm having a hard time. I think there's an important point here where we might need to potentially distinguish between people who are purchasing or owning properties with the intent of renting them as Airbnbs. People who want to say, hey, you want to spend your time off your hard-earned vacation week in Reading, versus people who might just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to Florida or France or California for 2 weeks. I might want to rent my house out for 2 weeks. And is that really a situation where we want to get like just a typical homeowner involved in all of this sort of this regulatory malaise and the taxes involved in that? So I just think that there's an opportunity here to kind of separate those two things. Although I don't object in principle to to the notion of this whole proposal, I think we need to be a little bit careful about creating this whole giant infrastructure that's going to do, it's going to deal with a very small problem by trapping a whole bunch of other people who really aren't part of the target audience into a bunch of rules and regulations and taxes that, just seem kind of overweening for what we're trying to accomplish here.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bonazzoli.
Go ahead, Mr. Bonazzoli.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. James Bonazzoli, Precinct 6. So besides the last sentence that was just added, because I'm all in favor of collecting taxes, I'm still against this because the instruction is engaging tree boards, and we're asking that the Board of Health start doing inspections. We have to do inspections of the property. How would you know that if somebody's going to put up Airbnb, 2 weeks before they leave or something? I just think this is too much of a burden on the town for very little funds that we're going to acquire. I'm against this instructional motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Coram.
Go ahead, Mr. Coram.
Jeffrey Coram, Precinct 7. I support this motion with the note that it is only an instructional motion, is not binding, and I would like to leave it to those 3 organizations that are named here to investigate and to think hard about what the right thing to do with this. We're not requiring that these bylaws be or changes be enacted. We're just asking those 3 organizations to look into these questions. Perhaps we could change the wording to say, instead of develop rules, to say investigate rules, but I'll leave it as it is because this is not a binding, this is just an instructional motion. So leave it as it is, let those organizations look into it and report back as necessary at annual town meeting in the spring. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Talbot.
Go ahead, Mr. Talbot.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dave Talbot, Precinct 5. I was actually going to say something very similar to what Mr. Coram just said, and I do support Mr. Pacino's instructional motion. The only 2 pieces I'd add is that you may be many more than just the 5 that show up in a search of Reading and Airbnb. People can put listings up and not be vague about the location and just say it's X miles from Boston. It's not that people are taking vacations in Reading. They just would use this as a hotel alternative. So I think a sensible look at this in the spirit of Mr. Pacino's motion is a good idea, mindful that it's an instructional motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Mon.
Go ahead, Mr. Mon.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jamie Mon, Precinct 4. Although I agree with the concept, having listened to some of the select board meetings and other information in town, the Board of Health particularly is overwhelmed with what they have to do, and assigning them another task I think is inappropriate at this time. I think their time would be better spent in other areas. And if the problem does become larger than 5 or so units, we could revisit this, but I'm opposed to this motion at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Oh, it just changed on me.
Yeah.
Ms. Mercurio.
Hi, Caitlin Mercurio, Precinct 2. I'm very much in support of this. I think some of these larger developments have the potential to essentially operate as a hotel while ducking the hotel tax. And if you live downtown near one of these buildings, it certainly makes a difference in the neighborhood, whether or not you have, permanent neighbors or constant visitors coming in and out. I would, however, like to see an exemption for owner-occupied rentals. I don't want to create undue burdens on our neighbors who are just, trying to make a few extra bucks, renting the room above their garage, for example, I think as a previous speaker mentioned. But I do want to be looking out for our community members who live near these large apartment buildings. So I'm hoping I can, propose a friendly amendment to add some language saying exemptions should be considered for owner-occupied units.
Okay, do we have that wording up there yet? All right, is that correct?
No, it should say okay, hold on. For non-owner occupied property. Yes, that works.
Okay, you're calling this a friendly amendment. I'll ask Mr. Pacino, is this okay with you? Then I will ask the body after that. Mr. Pacino?
Mr. Moderator, I have no problem with this friendly amendment. My intent is not to penalize if you're an owner occupied. I know in the other towns, particularly the ones down the Cape, they charge much less for the ones that are owner occupied than people that are non-owner occupied. So I have no issue with the friendly amendment and will accept it as part of the main motion.
Okay, I've been asked by the town council, Ms. Freed, to make a comment before we proceed with the proposed amendment. Ms. Freed?
Mr. Moderator, I'm sorry for the confusion. If the town meeting does decide to discuss this, I would like to speak to it.
Oh, I see. Well, I was going to ask if there was any objection, and if there's no objection, we'll probably move back to the main amendment, main motion, I mean. Is there any objection to that being part of the main motion? Put it in the chat and then check. I also check with the PAC. Okay, none appearing. Ms. Freed, do you still want to make a comment on it?
I would, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, Ms. Freed.
So I think for town meeting, what might be helpful here is to understand that we're dealing with two issues. The first is, how do we regulate these units? Where in town do they go? Do we require them to get special licensure? That is option. That's issue one. Issue two is the taxation, which we've already talked about. Now, to be clear, you can exempt non-owner occupied properties from your zoning regulation of short-term rentals. But once the town accepts its section 3A, I misspoke last of 64G, the ability to tax these units, you cannot decide which units you do or don't tax. It applies across the board. There is a state exemption for short-term rentals that are rented for 14 days or less in a calendar year, but whether a unit is owner occupied versus non-owner occupied, they're both subject to the tax equally. And that's at the state level. The town doesn't have any control to amend that.
Okay, thank you. Next hand up, we're back on the main motion. Ms. Hillary had her hand up before we broke to the amendment. Ms. Hillary?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jennifer Hillary, Precinct 7. Thank you, Mr. Pasinos, for such a thorough presentation tonight. I really appreciate the background for why you are bringing this instructional motion. I do support this motion. I think it's always good to be proactive. And I understand that there are concerns about adding more to the Board of Health's plate, but again, where this is instructional in nature, perhaps the boards can work together, and the extent that the Board of Health needs to be involved in these rules and regulations can be decided with the select board, and they can take into account how much is on their plate. Additionally, I don't know that we should assume that any rules and regulations that might affect owner-occupied property would have a negative impact on them. In fact, rules and regulations that are developed may actually assist in protecting our owner-occupied properties as well. So I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Joelson?
I move to vote on the main amendment.
Okay, we have a motion to move the question, which ends debate on the main motion. It's non-debatable and requires a 2/3 vote. Can we have the poll put up? This is to end debate. Okay, can we get the vote in the PAC?
3 yes, 0 no.
And the town clerk will now tally the votes.
With the poll being 137 yes, 10 no, PAC being 3 yes, 0 no, it's 140 yes and 10 no.
The vote being 140 in the affirmative, 10 in the negative, the motion carries to end debate to move the question. We will now move to the main motion as amended. So we'll have a poll put up and we begin voting. Okay, and the vote in the pack?
3 yes, 0 no.
Town clerk will tally the vote.
The poll being 114 yes, 35 no. The pack 3 yes, 0 no. It's 117 yes and 35 no.
Vote being 117 in the affirmative, 35 in the negative, the motion carries. Next, Mr. Giacalone had asked me earlier for a point of personal privilege. Is that something you still wish to do, Mr. Giacalone?
Mr. Giacalone, please raise your hand. There we go. Go ahead, sir.
Sure. Michael Giacalone, Precinct 5. Mr. Folds had addressed the roll call, but I had some thoughts that I just wanted to express. My disappointment with town meeting from what transpired that night. The roll call was requested for the stretch energy credit. The process began approximately at 11 o'clock and took nearly an hour to complete. And to what end? The same result of obtaining the vote would have been achieved with the same outcome in a fraction of the time if we had instead just used the poll vote process. At such a late hour, after many of us had been working a full day at our jobs, tending to children, being at home from school, potentially aiding older parents, just to name a few items, our ability to function efficiently and effectively may have been diminished. I will ask again, what benefit did the roll call vote serve? If the answer to my questions from those who requested and voted for the roll call is to let citizens of Reading know how town meeting members vote, then I must ask what made that issue any more important than any other issue we voted on that night. Without the time it took to conduct the roll call vote, we could have been much further ahead in completing our agenda and have had possibly much less work for us to do tonight. It was just not an efficient use of our time. I have no problem with the roll call vote. However, I fail to see what makes an issue qualify for such a process. Since I personally do not think that any vote we take is any more or less important than another, perhaps we should take a roll call vote on every vote of every single vote we take, no matter what the issue. Since the process requires that we vote to approve the roll call, then I will go so far as to recommend that the vote to have a roll call be a roll call as well, so that the citizens of this town know the town meeting members who advocate for the process. What Monday night demonstrated to me is that we need to update the rules regarding the roll call. Per the town's website, town meeting consists of 192 members. Only 20 of these members are needed to force a roll call. So only 10.4% of the town meeting base is needed to force such a time-intensive process with no beneficial outcome. For such a time-intensive process that some members may regard as very important, it should certainly require significantly more than 20 members to force the process. If the concern is to make available to the public how town meeting members vote on the issues, the citizens of Reading who want to know can simply ask town meeting members how they vote. I am perfectly happy to talk with my constituents. Let us make the most efficient use of our time and really decide in the future if it is necessary to bog down the process with roll call votes. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. I will point out that there is no, it is not technically legal. At least we have an opinion that it's not legal to take the roll call via the software that we use. That is why we took the poll the way we did. And now, do we have a motion to adjourn sine die? Ms. Landry?
Go ahead, Anne.
I move that we adjourn sine die.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor of adjourning this town meeting sine die, please vote in the chat. Vote in the poll. Vote being 100. Oops, still going.
Don't forget the pack.
I did forget the pack.
PAC votes 4 yes, 0 no.
When that's okay, the town clerk will tally the vote.
The tally is 148 yes and 1 no.
The vote being 148 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. This town meeting stands adjourned. Sine die.
Have a great night.